Today I have a really fun little demo that I want to show you, and this is something that everybody should be able to paint along with and enjoy, especially if you're using the right paper for this technique. And today the paper I'm using is made by Indigo Artpapers. It's a handcrafted watercolor paper. I love this paper because of the beautiful texture of this handmade paper. I love that the texture of this paper really works well with the granulating pigments that I love using so much. So we're going to play with this a little bit. I'm going to talk a little bit about Indigo Artpapers. I've used them for the last couple of years and I've enjoyed my relationship with the Indigo Artpapers company. We're going to just, the paper I'm using today is their 140-pound rough paper. It's 100% cotton, and I always look for 100% cotton paper because that is probably the single most determining factor in whether a paper is going to work well for fluid watercolor techniques. And I'm just moistening quite juicy, kind of a little tulipy shape on my paper. I love creating a tulip shape when I'm playing with color because it gives me a beautiful big shape to drop colors into. And for my colors today, I'm going to choose some Rose of Ultramarine from Daniel Smith. And you can see it goes on kind of this red-violet color. I'm going to tilt a little bit so it starts to flow. And because my paper's wet, when I place that color, and I'm going to put a big dark slash of it here and maybe another slash there and a little bit there. And because I can't remember what I was saying. Because my paper is wet, you can see it starts to flow right away. We're going to add a little bit of turquoise. This is Sleeping Beauty turquoise, and let that flow. And I think if you're looking carefully, you'll see what I like about the indigo paper. Already I'm starting to see some beautiful granules of color, little gathering in the hollows of the paper in a really gorgeous way. So at this point you should have a nice shape here that you haven't completely filled. On this side I have a nice crisp edge, but on this side, because I painted inside the moist area instead of right up to the dry part of the paper, I have some softness. And then I'm getting this big bead of pigment starting to gather here, water and pigment. So if I take my damp brush and pull it downward, I'm going to be creating a channel for that pigment to flow right off the page and right down to the edge of the paper where I can wipe it up with a paper towel. So now what's left behind is the pigment that kind of floated to the bottom and sat on my paper, and you can see the beautiful texture that's happening there. Now I don't really want my flower to have a purple stem, so we're going to choose a different color for the stem. I'm going to pick actually, let's see here, serpentine today. And if you don't have serpentine, you can use green gold, or you can just choose any other green. You can choose a dark green and add a little bit of yellow to it to lighten it if you'd like. Mixing colors using pre-mixed colors is a really good way to get the lovely multicolored effects I'm starting to get here in my painting. The Rose of Ultramarine is a pink and blue mixture, so as it starts to dry, you'll start to see more than one color emerge. You'll start to see a little bit of blue, you'll start to see a little bit of pink. They separate from each other. The turquoise is mixing with the Rose of Ultramarine. The serpentine is mixing, and it's got a little bit of multiple pigments in that tube as well. And so I can use all of those qualities to create beautiful mixtures on my paper. I need a leaf shape now, and we'll go straight to the serpentine again. And starting here, just pulling down toward the stem. And I start with the tip of my brush and then I press as I move downward. And that gives me a really great leaf shape. It's quite pale, so I can add more serpentine. And I'm very drippy today, so we'll make that a part of the painting. Because I actually kind of think that looks kind of fun. And I'm going to grab some of that same turquoise that I used in my flower petal and add it into my green as well. And I'm just giving all that color a chance to flow down off the page. And this is one of my very favorite ways to warm up in the studio. I can do this with a full sheet of paper and just cover the whole thing with pigment, or I can choose a shape like this kind of tulip shape, sort of tulip shape, and drop in color and see what it does. The different papers are going to handle the color in different ways. And a smoother paper, this is the Indigo's rough paper, so a smoother paper will not gather up the pigment in those tiny little holes in the paper. So let's just take a look a little bit more closely again. Okay, so right here I think you should really see the beauty of all the different colors on the paper. And this can give you just a lovely, lovely underpainting that you can go into and add more detail to after it's dried. The other thing is I think that it has such a beautiful simplicity. Sometimes this might be all you need to say with your painting. When your first layer is so beautiful, sometimes you just don't want to go any further. And for me, painting loosely and letting the colors mingle and flow on the paper, it helps connect me with my love of watercolor. Whether I take this to the next level and make it look more finished, whether I just leave it. I almost think that one thing that would be nice to do is just paint a really detailed bee flying around it and then leave the flower kind of unfinished, and that could give it that completed painting feel. But either way, I've created something that showcases the beauty of watercolor, the way the pigment sits on the paper, the way it flows and mixes together, the multiple pigments to create something, a color that doesn't have a name because it's a little bit of green, it's a little bit pink, there's a tiny bit of peach in there, there's a little bit of blue. And all of those colors come together to just pull you into the painting and just make you want to study all those beautiful subtle transitions. Something about the Indigo art paper just makes it easier for me to let the colors flow like this. And I've found that this paper, while it's quite soft and absorbent, it also gives you the opportunity to add water and push some of that pigment across the page, especially when I have a darker layer of pigment on. I haven't really done that for this painting. But when you have a lot of pigment on your paper, like this turquoise I just placed, you can add water and kind of channel it down the paper, give it a place to flow to. And it just has such a beautiful organic movement as it slides across the paper, following the path you've created with water, following the dictates of gravity. Gives that color a chance to move, to create these beautiful rivulets, and you can see the sediment, the color pigment granules just moving across the paper in a gorgeous organic way. And the Indigo paper seems to do this so well, and it's one of the reasons I enjoy using it so much. I frequently choose it when I'm wanting to paint in this very loose style, letting things flow and letting the color sit in those little pockets of texture on the paper. One of the things I like about Indigo art papers is its handmade quality. It does make it a little bit unpredictable to use. Around the edges of the paper you might find that the texture changes a little bit. It's a little bit uneven because of that handmade feel. It's a neat feeling to consider that you're collaborating with a maker in another country who's made this paper for you to fill with color. One more thing I wanted to mention regarding the Indigo art paper is that I've noticed that if you're buying the smaller sheets, like 8x10, 140 pound, it tends to have a right side and a wrong side to paint on. So what you want to do before you start painting is just do a little patch test in the corner, put a little dab of paint on there and see if it sits there nice and crisp, or if it soaks in and wants to have some blotchy edges. If you get those blotchy edges, you know you need to flip it over and paint on the opposite side. And I don't have this issue at all with the full sheets, the 22 by 30 inch sheets of Indigo art paper. So I like to buy the full sheets and then I can paint on either side pretty much equally. Ask for Indigo art paper at your local art supply store. They're working hard to widen their distribution throughout North America, and with your requests for their paper, they'll be able to be available in more areas. Check out their website at indigoartpapers.com.